Hey guys, tonight, you're stepping off a slow, creaking wooden wagon into a lonely frontier town somewhere in the American West. It's the late 1800s. The sun is sinking behind distant hills, the air smells faintly of horses, dust, and wood smoke, and the entire town looks like it was built in a hurry and forgotten just as quickly. A loose board groans under your boots as you step onto the wooden sidewalk. Somewhere down the street, a saloon piano struggles through the same tired tune it has probably played 1,000 times before. You glance around, one muddy street, a few crooked buildings, a couple of strangers quietly watching you from the shade. And in that moment, a very uncomfortable thought settles in. This place does not care about you. Not a little, not at all. Because the truth is, the Wild West isn't the heroic movie version where everyone rides dramatically into the sunset and settles arguments with stylish slow-motion gunfights. Out here, life is mostly dust, bad luck, empty stomachs, and the occasional rattlesnake that seems personally determined to ruin your afternoon. And if you stayed here long enough, well, you probably wouldn't survive very long. Now don't worry, we'll take this journey slowly. But before we wander any deeper into this surprisingly uncomfortable chapter of history, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Only if you genuinely enjoy these quiet little history trips, and if you're listening right now, leave a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from, along with your local time. It's always fascinating to see how far these sleepy history journeys travel across the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's gently step back into the Wild West together. You step down from the wagon into a cloud of fine yellow dust that immediately decides your lungs look like a comfortable place to settle. The town ahead of you stretches maybe 2 streets wide with a handful of wooden buildings leaning slightly like tired old men, a saloon with swinging doors, a general store, a blacksmith shop, and somewhere nearby, judging by the smell, several horses who are having a much better day than you are. The first thing you notice is the silence, not peaceful silence exactly, more like the kind of quiet where everyone is watching you without appearing to watch you. A man sitting outside the barbershop slowly lowers his newspaper. Another figure on a porch tilts his chair back and studies you like you might be a traveling salesman, or possibly lunch. You clear your throat, nobody waves, nobody smiles. Frontier towns have a simple rule. Strangers are interesting, but not necessarily welcome. Now, historically speaking, towns like this popped up across the Western Territories during the late 1800s as settlers, miners, railroad workers, and hopeful dreamers spread across places like Texas, Colorado, Arizona, and Wyoming. Many were temporary boom towns, built quickly and sometimes abandoned just as quickly when the gold ran out or the railroad moved on. Which means the town you're standing in probably wasn't built with comfort in mind, or safety, or plumbing, definitely. Not plumbing. A horse clops past you, pulling a wagon full of crates. The driver barely glances your way. His hat is pulled low. His beard looks like it's been arguing with a comb for several weeks, and he seems very focused on minding his own business, which, you'll quickly learn, is frontier survival rule. Number 1, mind your own business. You take a few cautious steps onto the wooden boardwalk. It creaks under your boots, and somewhere inside the saloon, a piano plays a tune that sounds cheerful in the same way a mosquito sounds cheerful, meaning slightly annoying and probably dangerous. Now here's a small historical fact that rarely makes it into movies. Many frontier towns actually had strict local rules about weapons. In places like Tombstone or Dodge City, visitors were often required to check their guns with the sheriff when entering town. Of course, that rule only works if people follow it. And out here, following rules is sometimes considered more of a friendly suggestion. A pair of cowboys emerge from the saloon doors laughing loudly. Their boots thud across the boardwalk, and you notice both of them wearing revolvers at their hips like it's the most normal accessory in the world. Which, unfortunately for you, it is. You instinctively step aside. Good choice. One of them glances at you briefly, then keeps walking. The other tips his hat slightly, though it's unclear whether this is politeness or simply a side effect of gravity. Either way, the moment passes. Your heart slows. Congratulations! You've survived your first 10 seconds in the Wild West. Only about 23 hours and 59 minutes to go. You continue walking down the street, trying to look like someone who belongs here. The problem is, frontier towns have a way of revealing outsiders almost instantly. Your clothes are cleaner, your posture is straighter, and most suspicious of all, you look well rested. Nobody here looks well rested. The buildings around you are rough wooden structures, many with signs painted in fading letters. Dentist, mercantile, stable, telegraph office. The telegraph office is one of the few links this town has to the outside world. By the 1870s and 1880s, telegraph lines stretched across the United States, allowing messages to travel across thousands of miles in minutes, which must have felt like magic to people who previously relied on letters delivered by horseback. Still, even with the telegraph, news travels slowly here. Trouble, on the other hand, travels very fast. You pause near the general store window. Inside, shelves hold sacks of flour, canned goods, lantern oil, boots, tools, and several items that look vaguely edible but refuse to clearly identify themselves. Food supply is unpredictable on the frontier. Sometimes a shipment arrives, sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes a wagon breaks down 50 miles away and nobody hears about it until someone wanders into town half a week later, looking extremely tired and mildly bitten by wildlife. You glance down the street again. The sun is dipping. Lower now, painting the dusty road in long golden shadows. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks lazily. Another odd detail about frontier towns: dogs were everywhere. They guarded livestock, followed cowboys, scavenged scraps, and occasionally formed informal street gangs that ran through town like furry outlaws. Nobody seems particularly concerned about them, which suggests they're either harmless or everyone is simply too tired to care. You continue walking until you reach the far end of the street, where the town fades into open prairie. The land stretches endlessly, rolling hills of dry grass, shimmering in the evening wind. It's beautiful, in a quiet, lonely kind of way, but it's also a little unsettling. Because out here, distance means danger. If something goes wrong, illness, injury, bad weather, a broken wagon, you can't just call for help. The nearest town might be days away, and the land between is not particularly forgiving. Scholars still argue whether the American frontier was truly as lawless and chaotic as later legends suggested, or whether many towns were actually more orderly than the movies imply. But standing here now, watching the sun sink toward the horizon while unfamiliar faces watch you from shadowed porches, you suspect the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Life here isn't constant gunfights and heroic showdowns. It's something much quieter, something slower, and possibly more dangerous in the long run. Because surviving the Wild West isn't about one dramatic moment. It's about surviving hundreds of small problems, every day, every hour, every decision. And as the evening wind lifts another swirl of dust down the empty street, you begin to realize something slightly concerning. You haven't even tried to find water yet, which, as it turns out, will become your first real problem. But that is waiting just around the corner. For now, the town settles into the soft orange glow of sunset, and the piano inside the saloon drifts lazily through the warm air. You take a slow breath. Your first day in the Wild West has officially begun, and the odds are not exactly in your favor. The sun hasn't even fully set yet, and already the Wild West is preparing its first test for you. You stand at the edge of the dusty street, watching the sky slowly shift from gold to orange, then from orange to a deep, reddish glow that spreads across the horizon like a quiet fire. It's beautiful. For about 30 seconds. Then the wind picks up. At first, it's just a gentle breeze moving through the dry grass beyond the town. The wooden buildings creak softly, and a loose sign somewhere down the street taps against its chain with a lazy clack, clack, clack. But the breeze doesn't stay gentle for long. Within minutes, the air thickens with dust. You feel it first. In your eyes, a fine layer of powder blows across the road and drifts onto the boardwalk like someone sprinkling flour over the entire town. You blink. Bad idea. Now your eyelashes feel like tiny sandpaper brushes. The wind rises another notch and suddenly everyone in town begins reacting in the same calm, practiced way people react to something they've experienced 1,000 times before. Hats go down, doors close, windows slam. You, on the other hand, are standing in the middle of the street like someone who has never met a frontier dust storm before, which, to be fair, you haven't. A cowboy passing by pulls a bandana over his mouth and nose and mutters something that sounds suspiciously like city folk. He disappears into the saloon just as the wind really gets serious. Dust storms were a regular part of life across the American frontier, especially in the dry plains stretching through places like Kansas, Texas, and eastern Colorado. With little vegetation to hold the soil in place, strong winds could lift enormous clouds of dust into the air, turning entire towns into swirling yellow fog banks. You experience this firsthand about 5 seconds later. The wind roars down the street like an invisible freight train. Dust fills the air so thick you can barely see 10 feet ahead of you. The buildings blur into vague shapes and the horizon vanishes completely. You cough, and cough again, and then immediately understand why everyone else covered their faces. Breathing feels like inhaling powdered dirt. The wind pushes against you, tugging at your clothes and trying very hard to convince you that standing upright is an optional activity. You stagger toward the nearest building, shielding your eyes with one arm while squinting through the swirling haze. Somewhere nearby, a horse whinnies loudly. Another odd little detail about frontier life: horses absolutely hated dust storms. Their large eyes were sensitive to blowing dirt, and many animals would panic if caught in strong winds, which means the stable down the street is probably experiencing what experts in modern terms would call a complete logistical disaster. You reach the porch of the general store and stumble onto the wooden steps just as the storm intensifies again. The sky darkens. The wind howls. Loose boards rattle. A wooden barrel rolls halfway across the street before tipping over dramatically. Like it's performing in a very low-budget Western movie, you lean against the door and try to breathe. Slowly, through your sleeve. Congratulations, you've survived your first frontier weather event, and it only took about 15 minutes. But here's the thing about the Wild West climate. It never really settles into something comfortable. During the day, temperatures across the western plains could climb well above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Shade was limited, water was scarce, and the sun had a very direct relationship with your forehead. Then night arrived, and the temperature dropped like a rock. Without humidity to trap heat in the air, the desert and prairie landscapes cooled quickly after sunset. That meant blazing afternoons followed by surprisingly cold nights, sometimes within the same day. You glance toward the fading sky again as the storm begins to weaken. The dust slowly settles back onto the ground, leaving the town looking like it's been lightly powdered with cinnamon. The wind fades, doors open again. Life resumes. Frontier residents step outside and brush dust from their coats with the same casual annoyance someone might show toward rain. One man sweeps his porch. Another rehangs a crooked sign. The stable door opens, and a very irritated horse pokes its head out as if personally offended by the weather. Meanwhile, you are still standing there, trying to remember how breathing works. A woman carrying a basket walks past you on the boardwalk. She glances at your dusty face and offers a small, sympathetic smile. "First storm?" she asks. You nod weakly. She chuckles. "You'll get used to it." The way she says it suggests that getting used to it may involve several years of coughing. Historically, settlers in frontier regions faced constant weather challenges: blizzards in winter, thunderstorms in spring, blazing drought in summer, and windstorms year-round. Weather forecasts, of course, didn't exist yet, which meant you discovered incoming storms the same way everyone else did, by looking up and hoping for the best. Scholars still argue whether frontier weather conditions played a larger role in shaping settlement patterns than economic opportunities like mining or cattle ranching. But standing here now, covered in a thin layer of dust and reconsidering your entire life plan, it's easy to see why climate mattered so much, because out here, the environment isn't just background scenery, it's an active participant in your daily survival. The sun finally dips below the horizon and the sky fades into soft purple twilight. Lanterns begin appearing in windows across the street, glowing warmly through the settling dust. The town quiets down. A cooler breeze drifts through the air now, carrying the smell of dry grass, horses, and distant wood smoke. For the first time since arriving, things feel almost peaceful. You lean against the porch railing and watch the stars slowly appear overhead. Without modern city lights, the night sky here is incredibly clear. Thousands of stars sparkle across the darkness like scattered diamonds. It's beautiful in a quiet, endless way, and for a moment you almost forget how uncomfortable the last hour has been. Then your stomach growls loudly. Right food. You haven't eaten since arriving, and judging by the way frontier life tends to operate, finding a proper meal may not be as simple as walking into a nice restaurant and ordering something with vegetables. Out here, dinner might involve salted meat, hard biscuits, or something mysterious floating inside a tin can, which means your next survival challenge is already approaching, because surviving the Wild West weather was only the beginning. The real question now is whether you can find something to eat, preferably something that doesn't taste like saddle leather. But as you step off the porch and head toward the general store, another thought quietly crosses your mind. Water. You haven't seen a well yet, and out here on the frontier, water might be even harder to find than food. Your stomach is still complaining as you step off the general store porch and back onto the dusty street. The storm has mostly passed now, leaving the air strangely calm, like the town just finished holding its breath. Lanterns glow in windows up and down the road. Somewhere, a screen door creaks. The piano in the saloon has switched to a slower tune, the kind that drifts lazily through warm evening air and makes the entire town feel just slightly drowsy. You take a few steps down the boardwalk and pause, because now another realization quietly arrives. You're thirsty. Not dramatically thirsty, yet not desert survival thirsty, but the kind of dry, scratchy thirst that reminds you you've been breathing dust for the last hour. Naturally, your modern brain suggests the obvious solution. Find water. Easy enough, right? You glance around the street, expecting to see something familiar, maybe a water fountain, a convenience store fridge, or at the very least a plastic bottle somewhere. Instead, you see horses, barrels, mud, and a suspicious-looking trough near the stable where several animals are currently drinking with tremendous enthusiasm. You stare at the trough. The trough stares back. This is your first real lesson about frontier. Living, water exists. Clean water is a different matter entirely. Most frontier towns relied on wells, rivers, or hauled water barrels. In many dry regions of the American West, especially across Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona, water had to be transported long distances by wagon, which means every drop mattered, and also meant people weren't terribly picky about how fresh it was. You walk slowly down the boardwalk until you spot something encouraging: a wooden pump beside a small well near the general store. Finally, civilization. You approach it cautiously, half expecting someone to jump out and charge you $5 per sip. But the street remains quiet. The pump handle creaks when you grab it. You pull it down once, nothing happens, you pull again. Still nothing, you pull a third time and suddenly the pump coughs like it just woke up from a nap. A weak stream of water splashes into the metal basin below. Success. You lean down, cup your hands, and take a careful sip. The water is cool, it is refreshing, and it tastes slightly like metal. And maybe a little bit like dirt, but at this point, you're not exactly in a position to complain. Historically, wells were the main source of drinking water in many frontier settlements. Some towns drilled deep wells to reach underground aquifers, while others depended on shallow wells that could easily become contaminated. Which brings us to an important and slightly unsettling detail. Sanitation in the Wild West was, let's say, flexible. Most towns didn't have sewer systems. Waste was often dumped into pits, outhouses, or occasionally just tossed into the nearest ditch. Rainstorms could wash that waste toward wells. Livestock wandered freely through streets, and sometimes, unfortunately, animals fell into wells. You pause mid-sip. Slowly lower your hands and reconsider your life choices. Scholars still argue whether waterborne illnesses were one of the biggest hidden killers of frontier communities. Diseases like dysentery, cholera, and typhoid fever spread easily when water supplies weren't properly protected, which means every drink here carries a tiny element of suspense, but thirst eventually wins the argument. You take another cautious sip, and another. Your throat feels better almost instantly. Dust washes away, and breathing becomes easier again. Still, you decide maybe not to gulp it down like a sports drink. Nearby, the stable door creaks open and a young boy steps out carrying 2 metal buckets. He stops when he sees you standing at the pump. "You new here?" he asks. You nod. He studies you for a moment, then gestures toward the pump. "Don't drink too much of that." You blink. "That well goes funny sometimes." "Well, that's reassuring." "Funny how?" you ask. The boy shrugs. "Sometimes folks get sick." He says it casually, like someone describing unpredictable weather. Then he walks over, fills both buckets with practiced efficiency, and carries them back toward the stable. You watch him disappear inside and quietly decide you've probably had enough water for now. The street grows darker as night settles over the town. Lanterns flicker softly in doorways, and shadows stretch long across the dusty road. Frontier nights arrive quickly. Without electric lights, towns relied on lanterns, candles, and fireplaces. Once the sun disappeared, most places became surprisingly dark, which meant people usually finished their daily work before nightfall. Except for one building, of course. You glance toward the saloon again. Its windows glow brighter than everything else on the street. Music drifts outside, along with laughter and the unmistakable sound of someone arguing about something extremely important. Probably poker, or whiskey, or both. Saloon culture was central to many frontier towns. These places served as bars, restaurants, social clubs, and occasionally unofficial town meeting halls. Cowboys finishing long cattle drives, miners fresh from the hills, gamblers, drifters, and travelers all gathered inside, which meant 2 things: food and potential trouble. Your stomach reminds you that dinner still hasn't happened, so you walk slowly down the boardwalk toward the swinging doors. As you approach, the smells become clearer. Cooked meat, wood smoke, beer, and a faint hint of something burned, though you choose not to investigate that detail too closely. Before entering, you pause beside the hitching post where several horses stand quietly under the lantern light. One of them turns its head and studies you with large, thoughtful eyes. Frontier horses worked incredibly hard. Cowboys might ride for 10 or 12 hours during cattle drives, and animals were often treated as valuable partners in survival. Oddly enough, many cowboys trusted their horses more than they trusted other people. Standing here now, that logic makes a surprising amount of sense because people in this town still haven't quite decided what to make of you. A group of men sitting outside the saloon glance up briefly as you approach. One nods slowly, acknowledging your presence without inviting conversation. Another spits into the dust. You take a breath, push the doors open, and step inside. The saloon is louder than expected. Lanterns hang from wooden beams overhead, casting warm light across a room full of tables, card games, and tired travelers nursing glasses of something amber-colored. The piano player in the corner keeps a steady rhythm while a bartender wipes mugs with a cloth that might once have been white. Nobody stops talking when you enter, but several people glance your way, just briefly, long enough to confirm you're still unfamiliar. Then the room returns to its usual noise. You find an empty table near the wall and sit down. A moment later, the bartender approaches. "What'll it be?" he asks. You consider asking for water, but then you remember the well and the boy's warning. So instead you glance at the menu chalkboard hanging behind him. It lists exactly 3 options: stew, bread, and something labeled simply as beans. Your stomach growls again. Dinner in the Wild West might not be fancy, but at this point, it sounds perfect. Still, as you settle into the chair and wait for your meal, another quiet thought crosses your mind. Food might solve your hunger tonight, but tomorrow morning, you'll probably be thirsty again, and next time, that well might be your only option. The bartender nods once and disappears toward the back of the saloon, leaving you alone at your small wooden table with the quiet realization that dinner in the Wild West is about to happen. You glance around the room while you wait. The saloon is warmer than the street outside. Lantern light flickers against rough wooden walls, and the piano player in the corner is tapping out a cheerful tune that somehow manages to sound both lively and slightly exhausted at the same time, which, honestly, feels appropriate. A group of cowboys crowd around a poker table near the center of the room. Cards slap against the wood, while coins clink softly into piles. Every so often, someone mutters something under their breath that sounds suspiciously like a threat, disguised as friendly conversation. Across the room, 2 miners sit hunched over bowls of stew, eating slowly with the determined focus of men who have spent all day digging holes in the ground. Their clothes are dusty, their faces are tired, and their bowls look extremely empty. You suddenly become aware of just how hungry you are. Meals on the frontier weren't exactly known for their luxury. Most towns depended on food shipments brought in by wagon or rail. Fresh ingredients were rare, and whatever arrived had to last until the next delivery, which meant frontier cooking focused heavily on things that could survive long journeys. Salted meat, dried beans, flour, coffee, and sometimes vegetables if the timing was lucky and the weather behaved. The bartender returns a few minutes later, carrying a bowl and a thick slice of bread. He sets them in front of you with the quiet confidence of someone who has served the same meal 1,000 times. "Stew," he says simply. Then he walks away. You lean forward and study the bowl. The stew is thick, dark, and steaming gently in the lantern light. A few chunks of meat float near the surface, along with carrots and potatoes that appear to have fought bravely to remain identifiable. It smells surprisingly good. You pick up the spoon and take your first bite. The flavor is hearty, salty, and comforting in the way only very simple food can be. It's not fancy, but after a long, dusty evening, it feels almost perfect. Your stomach immediately approves. You take another bite and another. Then you reach for the bread. Now, frontier bread deserves its own small historical moment. Most bread served in places like this was made from basic flour, water, and sometimes a little lard. Bakers often produce something similar to biscuits or sourdough loaves, which could be dense enough to qualify as construction materials. The slice on your plate is thick and slightly uneven, with a crust that looks determined to challenge your teeth. You tear off a piece and dip it into the stew. It softens instantly. Problem solved. For a few quiet minutes, you eat in peaceful silence while the saloon continues its slow, evening rhythm around you. Cards shuffle, glasses clink. Someone laughs, loudly at a joke that probably isn't as funny as they think it is. It's almost relaxing until the conversation at the poker table suddenly grows louder. Pair of kings, one cowboy announces confidently. Another player squints at the cards, then sighs dramatically and tosses his hand onto the table. Coins slide across the wood. The piano keeps playing. Nobody else in the room seems particularly concerned, which tells you something important about frontier dining. Entertainment often came included. You finish another spoonful of stew and lean back slightly in your chair, letting your stomach catch up with the idea that food has finally arrived. But then your eyes drift back to the bowl and a small, slightly suspicious thought appears. What exactly is the meat? You glance toward the bar where the bartender is pouring drinks. You consider asking, but then you reconsider asking. Frontier kitchens often used whatever meat was available: beef, pork, venison, sometimes rabbit, and occasionally things that didn't make it onto restaurant menus in modern cities. Which leads to one of the more amusing odd details about frontier cooking. Some cowboys jokingly referred to mystery meat stew as range surprise, because sometimes even the cook wasn't entirely sure what animal had volunteered for dinner. Still, scholars generally agree that most saloons served fairly straightforward beef stew when possible, especially in cattle country, where livestock was plentiful. You look down at your bowl again. The meat tastes good. That's probably all you need to know, so you keep eating. Outside, night has fully arrived now. The windows show only darkness beyond the lantern glow, and the wind has quieted to a gentle whisper against the wooden walls. Frontier nights were often peaceful in this way. After long days of work, people gathered in places like this to relax, share news, gamble a little, and enjoy the rare comfort of cooked food and warm company. But even peaceful nights carried a certain edge. Because everyone here understands something, you're just beginning to learn. Life on the frontier is fragile. Broken wagon, a sick horse, a sudden storm, or even a small infection could turn ordinary days into serious problems. Scholars still argue whether frontier communities were truly as dangerous as their reputation suggests, or whether the risks simply felt greater because medical help and resources were so far away. Either way, sitting here tonight, you can sense how thin the line between comfort and trouble might be. You finish the last of your stew and wipe the bowl clean with the remaining piece of bread. Your stomach feels satisfied for the first time since arriving in town, and that alone feels like a victory. The bartender returns and collects the empty bowl. Good? He asks. You nod. Best meal? All day, he chuckles. Probably the only meal all day. Fair point. As he walks away, you lean back in your chair and listen to the soft music drifting through the saloon. For a moment, the Wild West doesn't seem quite so threatening. You've found water. You've eaten dinner. The dust storm has passed. Maybe this frontier life isn't completely impossible, after all. Then a loud crash echoes from outside the building. A horse whinnies, someone shouts, and every person in the saloon suddenly looks toward the door. You sit up slowly, because one thing you're starting to understand about frontier towns: quiet moments rarely stay quiet for long, and the night is still very young. The crash outside the saloon echoes through the room like a dropped piano. Conversation stop mid-sentence. Cards freeze in midair. Even the piano player hesitates for a moment, his fingers hovering above the keys, as if the music itself is waiting to see what happens next. You sit up in your chair. Someone near the door mutters, "Probably just a horse," which, in the Wild West, is the frontier equivalent of saying everything is probably fine. The swinging doors burst open a second later. A gust of cool night air rushes inside along with a young cowboy who looks slightly out of breath and very annoyed. "Damn fool wagon knocked over the hitching rail," he says. The room relaxes instantly. A few people chuckle. One man calls out, "Your horse all right?" The cowboy shrugs. "Horse is smarter than the wagon driver." Laughter ripples across the saloon, and just like that, the tension dissolves. The piano player resumes his tune. Cards slap back onto tables. Life continues. You slowly lean back again, realizing something important. On the frontier, small accidents happen constantly. Wagons tip. Horses get loose. Barrels roll into the street, and everyone treats these things with the calm patience of people who deal with minor chaos every single day. Still, the excitement has shaken loose another thought in your mind. Where exactly are you going to sleep tonight? You glance around the saloon. The tables are occupied, the bar is crowded, and while the floor technically exists, sleeping on it probably isn't part of the recommended visitor experience. Frontier towns did have hotels and boarding houses, though. Hotel sometimes meant little more than a building, with several beds and questionable privacy. You stand up, stretch your legs, and approach the bar. The bartender looks up from polishing a glass. "Something else?" he asks. You lean slightly closer so the noise of the room doesn't swallow your question. "Is there a place to sleep in town?" He nods toward the far end of the street. "Boarding house next to the telegraph office." "Any good?" The bartender tilts his head in that thoughtful way people do when deciding how honest they should be. "It has beds." "Well, technically that answers the question." You thank him and step back outside into the cool night air. The street is quieter now. Lanterns glow softly along the boardwalks, casting long golden streaks across the dusty ground. Crickets chirp somewhere. In the darkness and above everything stretches the enormous western sky, filled with more stars than you've probably seen in your entire life. Without city lights, the Milky Way shines clearly overhead, a faint, glowing river across the black sky. It's beautiful, peaceful, almost magical. Then the wind shifts slightly, and you smell the stable again. Frontier towns had many wonderful qualities. Fragrance was not always one of them. You walk slowly down the boardwalk toward the telegraph office. The wooden planks creak beneath your boots, and every now and then a loose board makes a noise that sounds suspiciously like a warning. At the end of the street, you find the building the bartender mentioned. The boarding house sits beside the telegraph office like a tired companion. A lantern hangs above the door, illuminating a small sign that reads simply, "Rooms, no promises." No advertising, just rooms. You step inside. The interior is dim but warm. A narrow hallway stretches toward the back of the building, and a small desk sits near the entrance where a middle-aged woman flips through a ledger. She glances up as you enter. "You need a room?" she asks. You nod. She studies you for a moment, probably assessing whether you look like someone who can pay for that room. Frontier towns had a practical approach to hospitality. If you could pay, you stayed. If you couldn't, well, the prairie outside offered plenty of open space. "How long?" she asks. "Just the night." She nods again and slides a small brass key across the desk. "Upstairs. Third door." You thank her and climb the narrow staircase. The boards creak loudly with each step. Somewhere down the hallway, someone snores with impressive determination. Your room is small. Very small. A single bed sits against the wall beside a tiny wooden table. A wash basin rests on top of it, along with a pitcher of water that looks moderately trustworthy. The mattress appears to be stuffed with straw, which was actually quite common during the 19th century. Straw mattresses were inexpensive and easy to replace, though they had a tendency to rustle loudly whenever someone moved. You test the bed cautiously. The straw shifts beneath you with a sound like dry leaves. Comfortable might be a generous description, but after a long, dusty day, it's good enough. You remove your boots and stretch out on the mattress. The room smells faintly of wood, dust, and whatever soap the previous guest may or may not have used. Frontier hygiene was inconsistent. Many people bathed infrequently, partly because heating water required significant effort. Bathhouses existed in larger towns, but in small settlements like this one, washing often meant a basin of water and a cloth, which leads to one of the more peculiar historical details. Some frontier travelers shared beds with complete strangers in crowded boarding houses, not for social reasons, simply because space was limited and beds were valuable. Fortunately for you, tonight's room seems to be yours alone. Scholars still debate how comfortable frontier sleeping arrangements truly were. Some diaries describe restful nights under wide western skies, while others mention thin mattresses, cold drafts, and the occasional unexpected visitor, such as mice. You pull the blanket over yourself and stare up at the wooden ceiling. The town outside has grown quieter now. The saloon music drifts faintly through the night air, and somewhere a horse snorts softly in its stall. It's oddly peaceful, but sleep on the frontier isn't always easy. The temperature has dropped sharply since sunset, and the cool air slips through tiny gaps in the wooden walls. The mattress rustles every time you shift position, and the unfamiliar sounds of the night keep tugging at your attention. A distant coyote howls somewhere out on the prairie. Another answers. You pull the blanket a little tighter, because tomorrow will bring a new set of frontier challenges. And if the first few hours in town have taught you anything, it's that surviving the Wild West requires more than just a decent dinner and a straw mattress. For now, though, you close your eyes and hope the coyotes are just singing. You wake slowly in the early hours, your body stiff from the straw mattress. The blanket smells faintly of wood and dust, which, considering the frontier, you decide counts as clean enough. The first thing you notice is the light, or rather the lack of it. Outside your window, the sky is an inky black, dotted with stars. The town sleeps, but the wind whispers softly through the gaps in the boards, carrying the familiar sense of horses, dust, and distant smoke. Hygiene, you remember suddenly, is a thing you haven't really considered since you arrived. No running water, no showers, no toothbrushes waiting in cabinets. Just the basin on your table and whatever water the boarding house lady generously provided. Frontier hygiene is optional at best. A lot of settlers simply washed their faces with cold water from the basin and called it a day. Soap, when it existed, was precious. Washing too often could mean wasting your supply before the next shipment arrived. You pour some of the water into the basin and splash it across your face. It's cold, clean enough to feel refreshing, and slightly gritty. Gritty seems to be a recurring theme here. You wipe your face with a towel, trying to ignore the tiny flecks of dust that cling to your skin no matter how hard you rub. Clothing is another challenge. Most people on the frontier wore the same garments day after day. Laundry was rare, washing complicated, and the dust from the streets quickly turned anything clean back into what you might politely call well-worn. You step outside into the narrow alleyway leading down to the street. Morning air carries a crisp edge, unusual for a place that sweltered under the midday sun yesterday. You take a deep breath, realizing how dry it feels. The town begins to wake slowly. A dog barks in the distance, horses shift in their stalls, and the blacksmith's hammer begins a slow, rhythmic pounding on metal. Sounds that were negligible yesterday now seem loud and insistent, part of the ambient symphony of daily life in a town that doesn't sleep like the city you left behind. Food, you remember, is still a concern. Breakfast isn't guaranteed to be anything fancy. Most townsfolk rely on simple fare: coffee, biscuits, salted meat, maybe some canned or dried fruit if they're lucky. It's the type of meal that fills your stomach but doesn't exactly excite your taste buds. You pass the general store again. A few townspeople are already there, filling buckets and choosing flour sacks, candles, and the occasional sack of sugar. They nod at you without stopping their business. They don't need to make friends. Life here is too busy surviving to worry about pleasantries. The odd and unsettling detail about frontier hygiene is the sheer number of people who live in close quarters, sharing spaces and tools that would make a modern person cringe. Wells are used by humans, horses, and occasionally livestock. Wash basins get reused. Soap is not guaranteed. Even the best-kept homes can smell faintly of smoke, animals, and something you cannot identify. It's authentic, brutally authentic. Scholars still argue whether the frontier's lack of sanitation significantly contributed to early mortality rates, or if the harsh climate balanced the risk by limiting bacterial growth. Either way, you have to live with the uncertainty and the occasional itch from dust, dirt, and whatever else the wind carried in last night. You lean against the boardwalk and watch the town wake. A group of children runs past, laughing, barefoot, chasing a stray dog. Women carry baskets of food and laundry to the street for delivery. Cowboys lead their horses toward the stables, and miners trudge toward distant hills. Life continues in small, exhausting increments. Every movement, every step, is part of survival, part of the rhythm you're just beginning to notice. You glance at your own reflection in the window of the general store. Your face is dusty, your hair unruly, and your clothes smell faintly of last night's stew. You feel conspicuously modern, out of place, a little fragile, and for good reason. Frontier towns don't cater to comfort. They exist for people who can tolerate discomfort, unpredictability, and persistent small indignities without complaint. By the time the sun begins to rise fully, casting long golden rays across the dusty street, you've made a quiet conclusion. Showering, clean clothes, and daily grooming are luxuries here. Survival comes first. Cleanliness comes second, if at all. And even then, it's only temporary, destroyed by dust, wind, and work you take. Another deep breath, the dry air filling your lungs, and feel the small ache in your muscles from the straw mattress. You remind yourself, surviving in the Wild West is not about dramatic heroics. It's about enduring small challenges, dust, thirst, hunger, discomfort, over and over again. And right now, hygiene is just one more of those small, relentless challenges. The first hints of sunlight stretch across the horizon as you step outside the boarding house. The air is crisp, carrying the faint smell of wood smoke from chimneys, horses, and whatever is cooking in the saloon down the street. You take a deep breath, savoring the moment, and then it hits you. You feel a twinge in your throat, a scratchy cough forming at the back. A simple morning irritant? Possibly. But on the frontier, minor ailments can escalate alarmingly fast. Illness is one of the less glamorous challenges of Wild West survival. In towns like this, there's no clinic around every corner, no pharmacy with neatly labeled medicine. A simple fever can turn dangerous because antibiotics don't exist yet. Even basic care is limited to what local doctors, often traveling, or apothecaries can offer. And their knowledge sometimes relies more on guesswork than science. That cough you dismiss now could turn into something far more troublesome in a few days. As you walk toward the general store for breakfast supplies, you notice the first odd detail of the morning. Children with small bundles of cloth around their heads, likely to keep the dust from last night's storm out of their hair. They dart between adults, laughing and shouting, unaware of the precariousness that governs nearly every adult life here. And yet they survive, somehow. Their resilience is impressive, though slightly alarming, from a city-born perspective. You step into the store. The shelves are filled with canned goods, flour sacks, dried beans, and a scattering of tools and clothing. You're immediately drawn to the basics: some bread, maybe a few eggs if they have them, and a tin of salted meat. Settlers relied heavily on preserved foods because fresh goods were unreliable. Meat could be salted or smoked to extend its shelf life. Vegetables were often rare, and dairy products like milk spoiled quickly without refrigeration. Survival was a constant compromise between taste, nutrition, and availability. A man behind the counter gives you a nod. He looks like he's seen more dust storms than years in the city you left behind. "Breakfast?" he asks, not unkindly. You nod. He hands over a small portion of bread and a tin of salted meat. You pay with coins that feel unnervingly heavy in your hand. Money is important, of course, but here, trade and bartering still happen regularly. Sometimes goods are exchanged directly without cash, an arrangement that seems charming until you realize you need something very specific and nobody has it. You sit outside on a boardwalk bench taking careful bites. The bread is dense and dry. The salted meat is chewy, almost metallic in flavor. Not gourmet, not even remotely close. But it fills a hole in your stomach and fuels your muscles for the work of the day. You pause, reflecting that even a simple meal on the frontier carries a subtle tension. It's sustenance, yes, but it also reminds you that supply chains are fragile and every morsel counts. And then, without warning, a small gaggle of geese flies overhead, honking. One lands near the edge of town, startling a dog into a sprint across the street. The dog barks, the geese hiss, and a bucket of water tips over somewhere behind the general store. You flinch. Life here is unpredictable, but not dramatic, in a neat, obvious way. Threats aren't always immediate. They're often quiet, persistent, and cumulative. A minor cough, contaminated water, spoiled food, or a stray animal bite, all small individually, yet potentially catastrophic when combined. You take another cautious bite and consider the sheer endurance required to live here. Settlers rarely had time for idle leisure. Days were filled with tending animals, repairing fences, hauling water, and managing crops or livestock. Any pause was a pause that could risk food, spoilage, animal escape, or injury. Survival wasn't a heroic one-time effort. It was an endless repetition of practical, often monotonous, tasks. Oddly enough, the more you eat, the more you realize your body is adjusting. You feel your throat clear slightly, the cough easing for now. Yet the memory of last night's dust, storm, and the possibility of water contamination reminds you that illness is always a quiet, lurking threat. You may feel fine in the moment, but frontier life teaches patience with uncertainty. A single poor decision, drinking unboiled water, eating spoiled food, ignoring a minor cut, could spiral into serious consequences quickly. You glance down the street. The blacksmith is already at work, hammering metal rhythmically. Sparks fly, lighting his face in bursts. Horses are being saddled. Travelers are arriving dusty and wary. The town hums with a subtle energy, like an ecosystem carefully balanced between chaos and order. And in the middle of it, you, a newcomer, slowly begin to understand just how fragile your own presence is here. Every breath, every bite, every step matters. Scholars still argue whether frontier settlers lived shorter lives primarily due to disease, accidents, or environmental hardships. Standing here in the morning light, you don't need to consult studies to see the answer. It's all of the above, working together in a relentless combination. Survival is never guaranteed. You finish the last bite of bread and tin meat, feeling simultaneously nourished and cautious. Another day has begun. And somewhere deep inside, you start realizing that while the dust, hunger, and threats are obvious, the hidden killers, the quiet illnesses, contaminated water, and minor injuries might just be the Wild West's deadliest. Challenge, after breakfast, you wander down the boardwalk again, the sun climbing slowly into the sky. The morning light reveals the town more clearly, wooden structures leaning slightly, windows clouded with dust, and the occasional tumbleweed slowly drifting across the street as if testing gravity and your nerves at the same time. Life seems calm, almost serene. but you've learned better. Serenity in the Wild West is often a precursor to inconvenience, or worse. Your stomach feels satisfied for now, but survival here is about more than just food. Clothing, shelter, and protection from environmental hazards are equally vital. Your boots crunch against the wooden boards, sending tiny puffs of dust into the air. You notice that most townsfolk wear layers of durable, rough-spun fabric, thick cotton shirts, vests, leather boots, and hats designed to protect them from both sun and storm. Modern fashion would be laughed out of town, or worse, make you the target of constant teasing. Function over form is the rule here. You pass the blacksmith's shop, and the rhythmic hammering draws your attention. Sparks dance with the morning light as a muscular man pounds a horseshoe into shape. He doesn't glance up. You can sense the precision and repetition in every strike. This isn't entertainment, it's survival. A misplaced shoe could ruin a cow or horse's day. Broken tools could delay a farmer's work. Even a minor mistake carries consequences. The odd detail emerges quietly. The blacksmith is barefoot, not for comfort, not for fashion. He's been repairing boots and shoes all morning, and his own have been worn to nearly nothing. Dust and sweat cling to his feet. You step carefully on the boardwalk, suddenly aware of the fragility of your own footwear in this environment. The smallest inconvenience here, a torn boot, a loose shoelace, could be a real hazard. You wander toward the outskirts of town, drawn by curiosity more than necessity. The prairie stretches beyond, rolling hills of dry grass shimmering in the heat. A few scattered trees provide meager shade, and the wind begins its subtle morning dance. Dust stirs from dry patches of dirt, tickling your ankles. You take a cautious breath. Dust storms are more than just an annoyance. They're part of daily life. Inhaling it, as you remember from yesterday, is inevitable. Yet humans adapt, slowly, stubbornly. Water again emerges in your thoughts. You remember the small well behind, the general store, the boys warning about it, and the fine line between refreshing and dangerous. Daily life requires constant vigilance. You might quench thirst now, but the next day may bring low water supplies or contaminated sources. Out. Here, planning and caution can mean the difference between health and illness. You realize just how dependent frontier life was on consistency, something you cannot guarantee in a new town. A solitary horse grazes near the town's edge. It lifts its head as you approach, nostrils flaring. You notice the tension in its stance. Horses, especially on the frontier, were finely tuned to danger, predators, storms, and human missteps. You feel a strange kinship with the animal. Alertness here isn't a choice, it's survival. Even the calmest moments carry quiet threats. You glance back toward town. Children run errands, fetching water or tending animals. Women sweep porches, carry laundry, or chat in soft tones. Men lead livestock, repair fences, or check tools. The rhythm of work is unbroken, repetitive, and exhausting. You begin to sense a pattern. Survival is largely invisible. Heroics happen occasionally, but most of life is small, repeated acts. Carry water, mend fences, feed the animals, repair tools, avoid illness, stay alert, repeat. You stop by a wooden fence near the edge of town and lean against it. The breeze carries the smell of dry grass and distant smoke. You feel both small and exposed in this wide-open landscape. The vastness is beautiful, yes, but it's also intimidating. Out here, shelter is limited. Danger can appear from any direction: wildlife, weather, or human misfortune. This is the reality hidden beneath romanticized notions of cowboys and open plains. An odd, almost humorous detail strikes you. A rabbit darts across the prairie, pursued by a fox. The predator doesn't rush. It moves with quiet patience, a reminder that life here is a series of calculated decisions, repeated endlessly. Survival isn't dramatic. It's methodical, precise, and sometimes terrifyingly slow. You watch the chase until both animals vanish beyond the hills. The lesson is subtle. Life on the frontier rewards attention, patience, and a willingness to endure uncertainty. By mid-morning, the sun is high. Dust rises in small clouds around the town. The saloon's piano now plays a cheerful tune, signaling another day of social rhythm, gambling, and negotiation. The general store opens for business and townsfolk begin their daily errands. Even in these quiet hours, you sense the undercurrent of tension. Everyone here is finely attuned to survival. A misstep can have consequences far greater than a missed coffee in a modern city. Scholars still debate how much daily monotony versus sudden dangers shaped frontier mortality rates. Observing this town, it becomes clear the combination of both endless work and hidden risks is what made survival so demanding. Every task, from drawing water to repairing boots, carries weight. Every decision matters. And every small convenience you take for granted in the modern world, clean water, reliable food, soft beds, is a potential challenge here. You glance at your own hands, calloused from carrying a small satchel and bracing against the wind. Your modern body is adjusting, slowly, to a harsher rhythm. It's a reminder that adaptation is survival. Out here, it isn't about being strong or clever once. It's about endurance, repetition, and a willingness to embrace discomfort day after day. And as you return to the town's main street, the sun beating down, you realize the truth. Surviving the Wild West isn't just a test of bravery or skill. It's a test of your patience, your attentiveness, and your ability to endure discomfort over and over again without fail. The town is fully awake now. Dust swirls lazily in the morning sunlight, and the creaking of wooden boards underfoot marks every step you take along the boardwalk. The blacksmith hammers steadily, sparks flying from his anvil. Each strike seems to punctuate the rhythm of daily life here. Work, caution, survival, repeat. You watch for a moment, realizing just how central such seemingly ordinary tasks are to the town's existence. People pass you by, engaged in their morning routines. Women carry buckets of water or bundles of laundry. Cowboys lead horses toward the stables. Miners trudge past, boots dusty from the hills. Everyone's movements are deliberate, measured, and purposeful. On the frontier, idle time is a luxury few can afford. Even small mistakes like spilling water or losing track of a horse carry real consequences. You begin to sense how each person has adapted to this rhythm, learned to navigate danger almost instinctively. An odd and slightly comical detail catches your attention. A goat tied near the general store is nibbling on a signpost, completely ignoring the humans bustling around it. It stands there with a stubborn air, as though it knows that in a place where survival depends on vigilance, sometimes the animals follow their own rules. Life on the frontier isn't just about humans adapting, it's about negotiating space with every living creature around you. Your attention shifts to the saloon. The swinging doors reveal activity inside. Patrons sipping coffee or whiskey, cards being shuffled, conversations overlapping. The piano plays softly, punctuating the low hum of morning chatter. Saloons serve as more than entertainment. They're hubs for news, trade, and social interaction. Survival isn't just physical here, it's social. Knowing who is trustworthy, who has supplies, who can help in a crisis is as important as knowing how to tie a hitch or start a fire. You pause by the general store. The shelves are stocked with dried beans, flour sacks, salted meat, and other staples of frontier life. Fresh produce is scarce and perishables are rare. Settlers relied on preservation, whether through salting, drying, or canning. Convenience, as you understand it, doesn't exist here. You select a small bundle of supplies for yourself: bread, dried meat, and a few tins of beans. Every item represents a tiny victory in the ongoing challenge of maintaining basic sustenance. The sun climbs higher, heating the wooden boards beneath your feet. Dust rises in small clouds with every passing person or animal. You take another breath, remembering yesterday's dust storm. The wind is calm now, but the memory of choking on fine powder remains. Frontier life requires constant readiness. You never know when the weather might shift or when a storm will remind you just how fragile comfort really is. An old man approaches slowly, leaning on a cane. He gives you a nod and a brief, toothless smile. "Morning," he says. His clothes are faded and patched, boots scuffed, hat worn thin. You notice the faint scars on his hands, evidence of years spent handling tools, horses, and fire. Life here leaves marks, both visible and invisible. The man passes, disappearing down the street, a quiet reminder that endurance and experience define survival in ways subtle yet profound. You glance at the town's outskirts again. Beyond the boardwalk, the prairie stretches endlessly. Dusty hills, sparse trees, and the glimmer of distant water make the horizon feel both beautiful and threatening. Frontier towns are isolated. A broken wagon, a sudden illness, or a lost horse can turn ordinary problems into emergencies. Modern conveniences, roads, clinics, delivery systems don't exist here. Life depends on resourcefulness, foresight, and sometimes sheer stubbornness. Hunger creeps back subtly. Breakfast is digested, but the work ahead requires energy. You sit on a low fence post, unwrapping a piece of bread and some dried meat. The bread is dense, the meat chewy, not luxurious, not delicious, but filling. You chew slowly, aware that every bite counts. Food on the frontier is functional. Taste comes second. Calories and survival come first. Scholars still debate whether frontier communities were sustained more by sheer labor or by social cohesion. Observing the town now, it's clear both are essential. Work alone cannot maintain life here, and yet social networks, helping neighbors, sharing water, or alerting someone to approaching danger, provide an invisible safety net. You begin to appreciate the delicate balance of survival. Physical endurance paired with social intelligence. As the sun reaches its zenith, a gentle breeze picks up. Dust swirls lightly around your boots, teasing the edges of your clothing. You realize how closely you are tied to the environment. A misstep in timing, a delayed errand, or failure to account for weather could make even a simple day surprisingly dangerous. Every step, every bite, every decision matters. And as you stand stretching your legs, you notice a stray cat moving carefully among barrels near the stable. Its eyes reflect the sunlight. It pauses, flicking its tail. Survival instincts are everywhere, not just in humans, but in animals, in the land, in the smallest details of daily life. The frontier does not forgive carelessness. By late morning, you are fully aware of the rhythm, work, vigilance, and constant adaptation. Survival requires attention to every small hazard: dust, hunger, thirst, injury, disease, even the behavior of animals. One careless moment can quickly escalate. And, in a town like this, the lessons are quiet, persistent, and relentless. The day stretches forward with a slow intensity. You wander through the town again, observing the rhythm of life, the blacksmith hammering, horses being led to stables, children running errands, women sweeping porches. Every action is deliberate, purposeful, part of the continuous effort to maintain basic survival. You begin to understand that the frontier is a place where repetition is as vital as courage. A single lapse, a neglected fence, a mismanaged animal, a spilled bucket of water can cascade into real consequences. You notice the town well again. A few people approach, drawing water in large buckets. One man pauses and tips his hat at you. The water looks inviting, but yesterday's warning lingers in your mind. Wells are life-giving but unpredictable. Contamination is subtle. A single sip can be refreshing or dangerous, and there's rarely a way to know in advance. You consider walking past without drawing from it, a small victory in restraint. You continue down the main street toward the general store, intending to check supplies and perhaps barter for anything you might need. The shelves are familiar. Now, dried beans, flour, salted meat, some basic tools. Everything is functional, no frills. Life on the frontier is about necessity, not indulgence. You select a tin of beans and a loaf of bread, feeling a strange sense of accomplishment. Each small acquisition feels like a victory in a world where resources are not guaranteed. The sun climbs higher, and the heat begins to make itself known. Dust swirls with each passing person or horse. Sweat collects on your brow, a reminder that comfort is rare and endurance is constant. Shade is limited. Trees are sparse. Even a brief pause for rest requires strategy. Stand near a building, use a hat, or accept the relentless sun. Survival here is a mixture of resourcefulness and constant vigilance. You step toward the outskirts of town, curious about the land beyond the boardwalk. The prairie stretches endlessly, a blend of dry grass, small hills, and distant trees. It's beautiful, almost peaceful, but you know better. Isolation is double-edged, quiet and scenic, yes, but dangerous if misjudged. Predators, weather, accidents, each step outside the protective boundaries of the town carries risk. Life on the frontier requires careful calculation, constant observation, and the readiness to adapt quickly. An odd, almost humorous moment interrupts your contemplation. A goat stands stubbornly in the middle of the street, ignoring the humans and animals moving around it. It chews lazily on a signpost, seemingly unconcerned with the structured chaos of frontier life. Survival here isn't just about humans adapting. It's about coexisting with creatures that follow their own instincts, sometimes unpredictable, sometimes inconvenient. You glance back at the town. Activity is increasing. Miners trudge past with tools in hand. Cowboys check tack and prepare for the day's work. Women carry supplies. Children dart between errands. Every task is calculated, every movement purposeful. You notice the subtle coordination in seemingly chaotic motion, a town functioning smoothly because everyone knows their role, even if it appears improvised. Your thoughts drift to food. Breakfast has settled, but energy is necessary. You sit on a low fence post, eating a slice of bread and dried meat, chewing slowly. Taste is secondary to sustenance. Each bite provides fuel for the physical demands of the day. Food here is functional, straightforward, and essential. Hunger is not a fleeting discomfort. It's a motivator, a signal that efficiency and caution must continue. Scholars still debate whether frontier communities were sustained more by labor or by social cohesion. Observing this town, you realize it's both. Work maintains life, but relationships and informal networks provide support when things inevitably go wrong. Survival is not just physical, it's social. Knowing who to trust, who can lend help, or who might warn you of danger is critical. By mid-morning, the sun is relentless. Dust rises from the street. You take a deep breath, feeling grit on your tongue and in your eyes. Even in moments of calm, discomfort persists. Life on the frontier is a continuous negotiation with the environment. Adaptation isn't optional, it's mandatory. Every decision, every action, every observation contributes to survival. You notice a stray cat moving carefully among barrels near the stable. Its eyes glint in the sunlight. The cat pauses, flicks its tail, and slips into the shadows. Survival instincts are everywhere, not just in humans. Animals, weather, and environmental hazards form a continuous challenge that shapes daily life. You feel the weight of realization. Surviving the Wild West is not about heroics. It's about constant attention, adaptability, and endurance. The heat of midday settles over the town, dust swirling lazily in the dry air. You find a shaded corner by the saloon's overhang and watch life move around you. Cowboys inspect horses, checking hooves and bridles. Miners drag pickaxes and sacks of ore past, their boots kicking up small clouds of dust. Women tend laundry, sweeping porches or ferrying water. Every movement, small and deliberate, contributes to the ongoing act of survival. Here, efficiency is king. Even leisure is calculated. You notice a small oddity. A cat perched on the railing near the saloon door, staring intently at a mouse scuttling beneath a barrel. The cat doesn't pounce. It waits, patient and deliberate. It's a quiet lesson. The frontier rewards vigilance, patience, and timing. Small creatures demonstrate survival instincts as keenly as humans. A momentary distraction or misjudgment could mean hunger, or worse. You glance at yourself, realizing how reliant you are on observation to navigate this environment. Food again crosses your mind. Lunch in the frontier is a modest affair. Settlers relied on preserved foods, salted meat, dried beans, bread, because fresh provisions were often scarce. You open your small bundle of supplies and unwrap a piece of bread and some dried meat. It's not appetizing in any modern sense, but it's functional. Each bite sustains you, a small victory against the otherwise relentless demands of survival. The saloon buzzes softly in the background. Cards shuffle, conversations murmur. The piano plays in the corner, a steady, soothing rhythm that underpins the town's activities. Saloons serve more than food and drink. They're hubs for information, gossip, and social cohesion. In a place where resources are limited, knowing who to trust and who to avoid is vital. Social networks often determine survival, almost as much as skill or strength. You wander back toward the general store. Supplies are restocked, and townsfolk barter quietly, exchanging goods and gossip. A man trades a tin of beans for a loaf of bread. Another exchanges a jar of coffee for a small bundle of flour. Bartering is subtle, deliberate. Modern money has value, but tangible goods often hold more weight in practical survival. The lesson is clear. Being resourceful and adaptable isn't optional, it's essential. An odd detail draws your attention. A pair of horses wander near the outskirts of town, tied loosely to a fence. One repeatedly flicks its tail at a horsefly, stomping clumsily yet persistently. On the frontier, animals live under constant minor stress: flies, dust, hunger, uneven terrain, and their small movements reflect continuous adaptation. Watching them, you sense a parallel with human settlers. Endurance isn't glamorous. It's quiet, constant, and often invisible. The town well is active again. Buckets are drawn, water sloshing into containers. The importance of clean water is obvious. Contamination is subtle but ever present. Even the most careful preparation can't guarantee safety. Life here requires constant attention to detail, and yet mistakes are inevitable. Small errors, a misjudged sip, a dropped bucket, accumulate into larger consequences. You take a long moment to observe the prairie beyond the town. Dusty hills stretch into the distance, dotted with sparse trees. The landscape is beautiful, yes, but isolation amplifies danger. Predators, unpredictable weather, and accidents lurk quietly beyond the boundaries of human control. You begin to understand why settlers relied on vigilance, collaboration, and constant adaptability. Life here is a negotiation with an environment that is vast, indifferent, and relentless. A miner trudges past, wiping sweat from his brow. His boots are scuffed, his clothes faded and torn. He carries a sack of ore with deliberate care, each step measured. Every person here is performing a similar calculus, balancing effort, endurance, and risk. Survival isn't about heroics. It's about repeating small, precise actions over and over without fail. Scholars still debate whether frontier communities were more shaped by environmental challenges or by social structures. Observing this town, it seems clear. Both play a role. The land imposes limits and dangers, but the social network, the shared knowledge, the bartering, the cooperation, forms an invisible safety net that allows daily life to continue. Without it, even small tasks could spiral into disaster. As the sun climbs higher, the town hums with quiet intensity. You chew your last bit of bread and watch the people move, a mix of rhythm, patience, and constant attention defining every action. The Wild West isn't about dramatic duels or cinematic showdowns. It's about endurance, adaptation, and vigilance. Every small decision, every observation, every action contributes to survival. And today, as midday heat presses down, you feel the weight of that lesson settling firmly in your mind. By early afternoon, the town has settled into its rhythm. The sun sits high, casting long, harsh shadows across the wooden boardwalks. Dust rises with every footstep swirling around ankles and boots. You notice the subtle hum of activity, blacksmith hammering, horses shifting, the occasional shout from a miner calling out a piece of news. Life here is continuous, relentless, and utterly indifferent to comfort. Each sound is a reminder that survival depends on vigilance. You wander toward the outskirts, curiosity pulling you beyond the familiar buildings. The prairie stretches endlessly, dry grass swaying gently in the wind. Trees are scarce, providing little shade, and the land feels both open and intimidating. The isolation is profound. Here, even small mistakes, a misjudged step, a horse wandering off, a sudden weather shift, carry consequences. Life on the frontier demands awareness of every detail, every subtle signal in the environment. The odd detail emerges subtly. A group of rabbits darts across the prairie, pursued by a fox. The chase is quiet, measured, almost methodical. The fox doesn't rush, it stalks patiently. You realize the lesson is clear. Survival favors patience and attention, not impulsive action. Watching the animals, you recognize the reflection of human life in their movements. Constant vigilance, adaptability, and endurance are key to staying alive. Returning toward the town, you notice a well-trodden trail leading to a small stream beyond the prairie's edge. Water here is precious. Fresh sources are limited, and contamination is always a risk. Settlers often boiled water, filtered it through cloth, or relied on judgment honed through experience. Even small errors, drinking too hastily or ignoring subtle signs, could result in illness. The stakes are quiet, persistent, and ever-present. At the general store, a small group gathers, bartering goods: flour, beans, salted meat, coffee, all exchanged with careful negotiation. Modern convenience has little place here. Goods are tangible, and their value is practical. You realize that survival is as much about social skill and observation as physical endurance. Knowing who to trust, who has resources, and who can help in a crisis is critical. Social networks operate as an invisible backbone for daily life. You sit on a shaded boardwalk bench, nibbling bread and dried meat. Taste is secondary. Nourishment is primary. Each bite fuels your muscles and sharpens your awareness. Hunger is constant, subtle, and motivational. On the frontier, food isn't indulgence, it's survival. Even a small miscalculation in rationing could create serious problems later in the day. An odd human detail presents itself. A man repairs his horse's bridle while humming softly, seemingly unaffected by the relentless heat. The combination of focus, repetition, and patience is striking. Frontier work is often monotonous, physically demanding, and mentally taxing. Yet, individuals adapt. The humming is more than habit. It's a tool to maintain calm focus amidst continuous challenges. You glance at the town's well again. People draw water steadily, conversation flowing around small exchanges and pleasantries. Wells are a vital lifeline. Contamination, disease, and scarcity make them both indispensable and risky. A single misstep in water collection or storage could have cascading effects on health and energy. Observing the process reminds you how delicate everyday life is here. The sun climbs higher and the day grows hotter. Sweat forms, dust clings, and your clothing is already damp from the exertion of walking and observing. Comfort is minimal, but adaptation begins subtly. Your body adjusts to the rhythm of dust, heat, and exertion. Small efficiencies, walking carefully to avoid slipping dust, timing each sip of water, begin to emerge almost unconsciously. scholars still debate how frontier conditions shaped the human body and mind over generations. Observing this town, you recognize the answer. Repetition, endurance, and constant vigilance forged resilience. Every step, every bite, every observation contributes to survival. Even minor errors compound into consequences. The environment, the animals, the people, they all demand attention, adaptation, and awareness. By mid-afternoon, you lean against a fence post, feeling the slow fatigue that comes from constant observation and modest exertion. The Wild West is not glamorous. Heroics are rare. Most survival is quiet, unnoticed, and repetitive. Yet, it is relentless. Every day is a test of patience, endurance, and judgment. Every small action counts. And today, as the sun beats down and the dust swirls, you feel the weight of that lesson pressing subtly into your awareness. By mid-afternoon, the town has settled into a slower rhythm. The sun hangs heavy in the sky, casting stark shadows on the wooden buildings. Dust rises with every footstep, tickling your ankles and coating your clothes in a fine, persistent layer. The saloon hums quietly in the background, the piano notes, mingling with murmured conversations, distant hammering from the blacksmith, and the occasional snort of a horse. Life moves steadily, deliberately, with little regard for comfort. You wander toward the town's outskirts, drawn by curiosity more than necessity. The prairie stretches endlessly, the grass dry and brittle beneath the sun's glare. Sparse trees offer only minimal shade, and the open land feels both beautiful and threatening. Isolation is ever present. A sudden gust of wind kicks up dust. A rattling sound echoes somewhere distant. Could be a falling branch, a loose barrel, or just the prairie testing your attention. Life here demands constant awareness, even in seemingly calm moments. An odd and slightly humorous detail catches your eye. A dog chases its own tail near a fence, completely oblivious to the world around. In the context of survival, it's a quiet reminder that not everything in this environment is serious, yet distractions can happen at any moment. Animals adapt instinctively to the hazards around them, and humans must do the same, only with awareness and foresight. Every misstep, even in play, carries risk. Food again enters your mind. Breakfast and morning snacks have kept you fueled, but energy wanes quickly under the relentless sun. You unwrap a small piece of bread and some dried meat from your pack. Not gourmet, not even remotely appetizing by modern standards, yet it sustains you. Every bite is a calculated investment in stamina and alertness. Hunger here is never absent. It is a persistent companion, subtle, insistent, and demanding attention. You move back toward the main street. The blacksmith works steadily, hammering metal on the anvil. Sparks fly in the sunlight, catching your eye. The intensity of the work is mesmerizing yet exhausting. Each swing is precise, each movement deliberate. Errors could ruin horseshoes, damage tools, or cause injury. The rhythm of his work is a quiet testament to the discipline required to survive in this environment. The saloon buzzes faintly as patrons sip coffee or whiskey, shuffle cards, and exchange news. These social interactions are crucial. In a world without instant communication, information travels slowly and selectively. Knowing who is trustworthy, who has supplies, or who can offer help could determine the difference between safety and misfortune. Social networks are as essential as water or food, functioning as an invisible layer of protection for those who understand them. A miner trudges past, boots scuffed and worn. He carries a sack of ore, sweat glistening on his brow. His steps are measured, deliberate. Every movement reflects adaptation, endurance, and awareness of hazards. The repetition of labor is central to survival. Tasks are mundane yet vital: drawing water, repairing tools, tending animals, hauling supplies. Each is a small but necessary piece in the ongoing challenge of existence. The town well is busy. People draw water steadily, conversation mingling with the sound of splashing buckets. Water is essential but not guaranteed safe. Contamination can occur unnoticed, and even minor errors, dropping a bucket, failing to boil the water, or sharing it indiscriminately can have cascading consequences. Attention to these details is vital. Survival depends on careful observation and informed action. Scholars still debate the impact of constant labor and exposure on frontier settlers' health. Observing this town, the answer seems evident. Endurance, vigilance, and repeated, deliberate action were necessary for survival. Every small decision, whether fetching water, managing supplies, or observing animals, could determine well-being or hardship. Life here is a continuous, subtle negotiation with the environment, animals, and other humans. By late afternoon, the sun begins to lean toward the horizon, but the heat lingers. Dust sticks to sweat-slicked skin. Your body feels fatigue from the combined exertion and awareness required to navigate the town. The Wild West is not about spectacular duels or dramatic heroics. Survival is quiet, relentless, and repetitive. Every step, every bite, every observation counts. And today, as the sun warms the dusty town and life continues its measured rhythm, you begin to understand the subtle, persistent demands of existence in this world. Late afternoon drifts slowly over the town, and the sun softens its harsh glare into a muted golden light. Shadows lengthen across the wooden boardwalks, dust settling lazily on boots and wagon wheels. Life moves with the same steady rhythm you've been following. The blacksmith continues his hammering, horses shift in their stalls, and the occasional shout of a miner echoes from the outskirts. The Wild West doesn't pause for comfort. It only pauses when survival permits a brief reprieve. You wander toward the general store again, watching people navigate their errands with quiet efficiency. A woman carries a basket of laundry, stepping carefully around a loose plank. Children dart across the street, laughing and chasing a stray dog. Every movement is intentional, deliberate, shaped by the constant awareness of hazards, both visible and hidden. Even a minor misstep, tripping, dropping a bucket, misjudging a horse's path, could lead to injury or worse. An odd detail distracts you for a moment. A rooster, perched atop a fence post, crowing as if insisting on marking time, oblivious to the humans below. The animal's persistence is almost comical, yet it is a subtle reminder that life here has its rhythms beyond human control. Nature dictates its own schedule, and those who fail to observe it do so at their peril. Food is on your mind again. You unwrap a small portion of dried meat, chewing slowly and deliberately. Every bite is functional, fueling your body for the work and vigilance required to navigate the town and its surroundings. Hunger is not a fleeting discomfort here. It's a constant companion, a subtle motivator, shaping decisions and pacing throughout the day. Nutrition isn't indulgence, it's endurance. The saloon's piano plays softly, a comforting rhythm amid the hum of daily life. Patrons sip coffee or whiskey, exchanging news and small talk. The social component of survival becomes clear. Information, trust, and community networks are as vital as water or food. Observing who interacts with whom, who is cautious, who is confident, provides insight into subtle hierarchies and alliances that can influence daily safety and long-term survival. You glance toward the outskirts where the prairie stretches endlessly. Dust rises from dry grass with each passing horse or wagon. The land is open and beautiful, but exposure is constant. Predators, sudden storms, or minor accidents can escalate quickly into emergencies. Survival depends on observation, preparation, and adaptability. Every action, no matter how small, carries potential consequences. A miner passes by, sweaty and worn, carrying a sack of ore. His movements are deliberate, precise, and repetitive. This monotony, you realize, is central to life here. Tasks are rarely dramatic, but they are vital. Drawing water, repairing fences, feeding livestock, these actions constitute the bulk of frontier survival. Repetition and endurance, rather than heroics, define existence in this world. The town well is active again, a hub of subtle interaction and careful observation. Drawing water is essential yet risky. Contamination is ever present. A dropped bucket, unboiled water, or sharing with an unwell individual can have cascading consequences. Attention to small details, diligence, and foresight are paramount. Life here rewards vigilance and punishes carelessness. Scholars still debate whether frontier mortality stemmed more from environmental hazards or human error. Observing the town, now it seems clear, both played an intertwined role. The environment imposes constant challenges, while human vigilance, adaptation, and cooperation form a fragile safety net. Every minor action, whether a careful step, a rationed meal, or an observation of animal behavior, contributes to survival. As late afternoon turns toward early evening, the air cools slightly, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke from chimneys. Dust settles, and the town slows its constant rhythm just enough for reflection. You feel the subtle fatigue of repeated vigilance, the slow burn of muscle exertion, and the quiet realization that survival here is an unglamorous, relentless blend of endurance, attention, and adaptability. The Wild West does not wait, and neither can those who hope to live within it. Early evening arrives with a gentle shift in the light. The harsh glare of the midday sun softens into a golden glow that casts long shadows across the town. Dust still hangs in the air, but the wind has calmed slightly, giving you a chance to breathe more deeply. The rhythmic sounds of daily life persist. The blacksmith's hammer, the occasional neigh of a horse, the soft chatter of townsfolk winding down their tasks. Here, there's never a true pause, just a subtle transition from one rhythm to another. You wander down the boardwalk, observing the town in this softer light. Women carry laundry or sweep porches. Children chase each other between errands, laughing with abandon. The movement is deliberate, yet playful, a balance between efficiency and the small freedoms that survive even in a harsh environment. You notice the care with which people handle tools, animals, and supplies. Every action is measured, minimizing risk in a world where mistakes can be costly. An odd detail captures your attention. A horse shakes its mane vigorously, flinging dust into the fading sunlight. The animal seems almost proud of the mess, oblivious to the human concern for cleanliness. It's a humorous, subtle reminder that the frontier's challenges are not always human-made. Nature operates on its own terms, and adaptation, both by animals and humans, is constant. Hunger nudges at you again. Your small meal from earlier is long digested, leaving you alert but slightly fatigued. You unwrap another piece of bread and some dried meat, chewing slowly. The flavor is secondary. Nourishment and energy are primary. Survival here depends on consistently fueling your body for work, vigilance, and occasional emergencies. Food is a practical tool, not a pleasure. The saloon's ambiance shifts as evening draws near. Conversations soften, chairs scrape gently on wooden floors, and the piano continues its rhythmic accompaniment. Saloons are social hubs, places where settlers exchange news, gossip, and essential information. Here, knowledge is as vital as food or water. Knowing who is trustworthy, who can provide aid, and who might pose a risk is critical. Observing interactions becomes an essential part of daily life. You glance toward the outskirts once more. The prairie stretches into the distance, bathed in the warm glow of sunset. Trees provide sparse shade, and the land feels both inviting and intimidating. Isolation amplifies vulnerability. Even small missteps, losing track of a horse, underestimating the weather, or encountering wildlife can have serious consequences. Life on the frontier requires constant awareness, adaptability, and patience. A miner passes by, his tools slung over his shoulder. Sweat glistens on his brow, and dust clings to his boots. Each step reflects experience, endurance, and careful calculation. Survival here is a series of repeated actions, each small but essential. Tasks are often monotonous yet vital: fetching water, repairing fences, tending animals. Repetition builds resilience, and mistakes are costly. The town well draws attention. Again, people collect water carefully, mindful of potential contamination. One wrong move, a dropped bucket, unfiltered water, or a minor cut can escalate into serious consequences. Vigilance is constant, patience required, and adaptation inevitable. Life here rewards awareness and punishes oversight. Scholars still debate whether frontier settlements survived primarily through communal support or sheer personal endurance. Observing this town, it's clear that both are intertwined. Environment and human effort coexist in a delicate balance. Every small choice, rationing food, observing animals, maintaining tools, contributes to survival. The frontier doesn't forgive negligence, but it does reward those who adapt. As sunset fades and the sky takes on soft pinks and purples, the town slows slightly. The air cools, carrying the faint smell of wood smoke and dust. You feel the cumulative fatigue of constant vigilance, minor exertion, and adaptation. Life on the frontier is relentless, but tonight the soft light allows for a brief, quiet reflection. You realize that survival here isn't heroic, it's persistent, measured, and unglamorous. Every step, every observation, every decision matters. Evening deepens and the town begins its subtle transition from workday to night. The sun has dipped low, painting the horizon with muted shades of orange and purple. Dust settles gently onto the wooden boardwalks, clinging to boots and the folds of clothing. Life slows slightly, but the rhythm persists. A horse shifts in its stall, the blacksmith packs up tools, and a distant laugh carries from the saloon. Even in slower moments, vigilance remains essential. You walk along the boardwalk, noticing the quieter details now more clearly. Women carry water buckets from the well, their movements deliberate to avoid spilling. Children chase each other in fading light, but their steps are cautious, honed by repeated experience. Every person seems attuned to the subtle risks of the environment: loose boards, dust clouds, animals, and uneven surfaces. Life here is a dance of attention, endurance, and careful observation. A small, odd detail draws your eye. A chicken struts confidently across the street, completely ignoring the humans and horses nearby. Its tiny, purposeful steps are a reminder that animals operate on instincts honed over generations. They adapt quietly, persistently, surviving the same challenges that humans face but without conscious planning. Observing them, you recognize a reflection of your own survival struggle. Adaptability, awareness, and endurance are essential. Hunger reminds you of itself once more. You unwrap a portion of dried meat and a slice of dense bread. Chewing slowly, you appreciate that sustenance here is about functionality. Taste and pleasure are secondary to energy and endurance. Every bite is a small investment in your ability to remain alert, agile, and prepared for the unknown challenges of frontier life. The saloon emits a soft murmur of conversation, punctuated by gentle piano notes. Patrons discuss mundane topics, exchange tips, and share news. Social awareness is as critical as physical survival. Understanding who can be trusted, who has resources, and who might offer assistance in emergencies forms a subtle safety net. Life here demands attention to human behavior as much as environmental hazards. You glance toward the prairie beyond the town. Dusty hills roll into the distance, small trees casting long shadows. The land is open and beautiful, but exposes those who traverse it to constant hazards. Sudden weather changes, predatory animals, or missteps that could escalate quickly. Awareness and preparation are continuous requirements. Survival depends on observing subtle cues and acting with deliberate caution. A miner drags his sack of ore past the boardwalk, dust clinging to boots and clothing. His movements are repetitive yet precise, reflecting the steady labor necessary to sustain life in this environment. Work here is monotonous, but vital. Fetching water, tending animals, repairing fences. Repetition builds resilience. Mistakes can be costly. Heroism is rare. Endurance is key. The town well remains active. Water is drawn carefully, and each person approaches the task with awareness. Contamination, injury, or mismanagement could have serious consequences. Observing this process reinforces the lesson that survival requires attention to detail, patience, and ongoing vigilance. Every action, however small, contributes to continued existence. Scholars still debate how frontier life shaped human behavior and resilience. From your perspective, it's clear: the environment, social networks, and constant repetition cultivate endurance. Every minor decision, rationing food, observing animals, maintaining tools, plays a crucial role. The frontier punishes neglect and rewards attentiveness. As night approaches, shadows deepen and the air cools. Smoke from chimneys mingles with the faint scent of prairie grass. You feel a quiet fatigue, a blend of mental vigilance and physical exertion. Life on the frontier is relentless, but the soft evening light allows a moment of reflection. Survival isn't dramatic, it's persistent, deliberate, and measured. Every observation, every step, every choice matters. Night falls slowly over the town, and a cooler breeze sweeps across the boardwalks, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and dry prairie grass. The sun has dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a sky painted in deep purples and soft oranges. Shadows stretch long and merge into the dim glow of lanterns that flicker along porches and the saloon. Life slows, but it never truly stops. Even in darkness, vigilance is essential. You wander the streets carefully, noticing how shadows play tricks on the eyes. Every movement of a horse, a dog, or even a fluttering piece of cloth could be misinterpreted as danger. Your senses heighten. Noise, movement, and smell all take on a new significance in the dim light. The frontier teaches you quickly that low visibility doesn't reduce danger, it magnifies it. An odd detail draws your attention. A cat sits perched on a fence post, tail twitching, eyes glowing faintly in the lantern light. It watches intently, unmoving, alert to every sound. You realize that animals, like humans, live in constant vigilance here. Every slight rustle, every distant movement could signal opportunity or threat. Observation, patience, and timing are key to survival in both human and animal worlds. Hunger is a subtle companion this evening. You unwrap a small portion of bread and dried meat. Every bite is functional, fueling both mind and body. Taste has little place in this world. Energy and endurance come first. Sustenance is a tool, a deliberate act to maintain readiness for the next challenge, whether mundane or unexpected. The saloon emits a gentle murmur of activity. Patrons exchange soft words, shuffle cards, and sip their drinks in quiet conversation. Even in low light, social awareness remains critical. Who can be trusted? Who carries knowledge that could help or harm? Settlers operate in a web of relationships that form an invisible layer of safety, providing guidance and subtle protection. Knowledge, like water or food, is survival. You glance beyond the town to the prairie. The land is vast, darkened by night, yet still imposing. Every shadow, every rustle of grass or distant animal movement commands attention. Isolation amplifies risk. Predators, sudden storms, or accidents can escalate in the darkness. Life on the frontier demands constant alertness, adaptability, and respect for the environment. A miner trudges home, his lantern swaying with each step. Sweat stains his shirt from the afternoon's labor. Dust clings to boots and trousers. Repetition and endurance define life here. Tasks are monotonous but essential: hauling water, repairing fences, feeding livestock. Mistakes are rarely dramatic but can accumulate, causing illness, injury, or lost resources. Survival is quiet, measured, and relentless. The town well is quieter now, though some still draw water cautiously. Contamination remains a constant threat. A single misstep, A spilled bucket, unfiltered water, or injury while drawing can have cascading consequences. Vigilance, patience, and foresight continue to be your best allies. Every action, even the smallest, contributes to continued survival. Scholars still debate the interplay of environmental hazards, labor demands, and social networks in shaping frontier resilience. From your observations tonight, it's clear. Life here requires constant adaptation. Every decision, rationing food, observing animals, maintaining tools, is critical. Neglect or oversight is punished, while attentiveness rewards endurance. As darkness fully settles, the town hums softly. Lanterns glow like tiny stars against the deepening night sky. You feel a quiet fatigue from hours of vigilance and exertion. Survival in the Wild West is relentless, unglamorous, and subtle. Heroics are rare, endurance is constant. Every observation, step, and choice carries weight. And as night enfolds the town, you realize that life here is a continuous, persistent negotiation with both the visible and hidden challenges of the frontier. The night deepens and the town settles into an almost hypnotic rhythm. Lanterns cast warm circles of light on the wooden boardwalks, flickering gently in the cool evening breeze. Dust has mostly settled, though faint particles catch the light occasionally, dancing lazily in the shadows. Life slows, but does not stop. Horses snort softly, the distant piano hums from the saloon, and the occasional creak of wood punctuates the quiet. Vigilance remains essential, even as the day winds down. You walk along the streets, noticing subtle details more clearly now in the dim glow. Children's laughter fades as they retreat indoors, and women finish evening chores with careful, deliberate movements. Each step, each action reflects constant awareness. Even minor missteps, tripping, dropping a bucket, or startling an animal, could escalate into larger problems. Life here demands unbroken attention, patience, and adaptability. An odd detail grabs your attention. A goat stands stubbornly near the general store, chewing on a post as though claiming a tiny kingdom. Its indifference to the surrounding humans is amusing yet instructive. Survival on the frontier isn't only about human strategy, it requires negotiating with the unpredictable behaviors of animals and the environment. Every small interaction matters. Hunger presses subtly again. You unwrap a piece of bread and some dried meat, chewing deliberately. In this world, sustenance is about function, not enjoyment. Calories and energy are more valuable than taste. Each bite fuels alertness, endurance, and readiness for the unexpected. Food is a tool in your survival kit, not a luxury. The saloon's soft murmur provides background comfort. Patrons exchange low conversations, cards shuffle quietly, and the piano's rhythm soothes without distraction. The social web is ever present. Knowing who is trustworthy, who carries essential knowledge, and who can offer help is as crucial as physical readiness. Life here relies as much on social awareness as on strength or skill. You glance at the prairie beyond town. Darkness stretches over the landscape, amplifying its vastness and hazards. Shadows hide movement, and the smallest noise can signal danger. Isolation is both beautiful and threatening. Sudden storms, predatory animals, or minor accidents could escalate quickly. Awareness, preparation, and caution are constant requirements. Survival here is never passive. A weary miner passes by, lanterns swaying with each step. Dust clings to his clothes, and sweat from earlier labor still dampens his shirt. Every motion is calculated, precise, and repetitive. Monotonous tasks, feeding livestock, repairing fences, fetching water, form the backbone of frontier life. Mistakes can compound silently, creating problems that may not be immediately obvious but are dangerous nonetheless. The town well sees little evening activity, yet the importance of water remains. One careless sip, a contaminated bucket, or injury, while drawing water could trigger serious consequences. Observing and adapting remain crucial. Every action, however minor, contributes to the fragile balance of survival. Scholars still debate whether the harsh environment or social networks shaped frontier endurance most. Tonight, observing the town, you see both forces in play. Every action, rationing food, tending animals, maintaining tools, watching social cues, matters. Neglect or distraction has real consequences, while attention and adaptability are rewarded with survival. As night deepens, the town's rhythm softens, but life continues in quiet persistence. Lanterns glow like small constellations against the prairie dark sky. You feel the fatigue of sustained attention, the subtle ache of constant vigilance, and the reality that survival in the Wild West is unrelenting and unglamorous. Every observation, step, and choice shapes your ongoing negotiation with the environment, animals, and people around you. Night is fully settled now, and the town is bathed in the soft glow of lanterns. The cool evening breeze carries the faint scent of wood smoke and dry grass from the prairie. Dust that hung in the air all day has mostly settled, leaving a thin, almost imperceptible layer over everything. The rhythm of life has slowed, but it hasn't stopped. Horses shift in their stalls, distant piano notes drift from the saloon, and occasional murmurs of conversation ripple through the streets. Even now, vigilance remains a quiet necessity. You wander along the boardwalk, noticing subtle movements. A woman carries water carefully, placing each bucket down with precision to avoid spills. Children peek out from behind corners, chasing each other quietly, aware of the adults watching. Every gesture, every action is calculated, small, deliberate, adjustments that reduce risk and maintain stability. Life here is a constant negotiation with hazards, both seen and unseen. An odd detail catches your attention. A crow hops along the fence posts, cawing intermittently, eyes bright in the lantern light. Its presence is a reminder that survival here involves more than humans. Animals, the environment, and even small, seemingly insignificant details contribute to the constant rhythm of caution and awareness. Every sound, shadow, and movement is potentially meaningful. Hunger is a subtle but constant companion. You unwrap a small portion of dried meat and a slice of bread. Flavor is irrelevant. Functionality matters. Each bite sustains energy and focus, preparing you for the unpredictable challenges of frontier life. In this world, nourishment is a tool for endurance, not pleasure. Every calorie counts. The saloon hums quietly in the background. Patrons sip drinks, shuffle cards, and share news in low tones. Social observation remains essential. Knowing who can be trusted, who carries important information, and who may pose a threat is as critical as any practical skill. Social awareness provides a hidden layer of security that in some ways rivals food and water in importance. You glance toward the prairie beyond town. The darkened landscape stretches endlessly, open and imposing. Predators, sudden storms, or accidents could emerge from the shadows at any moment. Isolation intensifies risk, demanding constant vigilance and careful planning. Even minor mistakes, misjudging distance, underestimating weather, or failing to notice subtle signs, carry real consequences. A miner drags his sack of ore toward the outskirts, lanterns swinging, boots crunching on the dry earth. Every movement is deliberate, calculated, and repetitive. Monotonous tasks, drawing water, tending animals, repairing fences, are essential for life here. Mistakes, though often subtle, can accumulate into serious problems. Heroic action is rare. Quiet endurance is the frontier's true measure. The town well is quiet now, though its importance remains. Contamination, accidents, or poor handling could have cascading effects. Every step in daily routines, fetching water, observing surroundings, maintaining tools is vital for survival. Life here rewards attentiveness and punishes negligence. Scholars still debate how frontier life shaped human resilience and behavior. Observing tonight, it's clear. Endurance, vigilance, and repetition define survival. Every small action, rationing food, monitoring animals, repairing equipment, observing social cues, contributes to staying alive. The frontier offers no forgiveness for carelessness. As the night deepens, the town hums softly, lanterns glowing, like small stars against the prairie dark sky. You feel the fatigue of prolonged vigilance, the subtle tension of repeated exertion, and the quiet realization that survival in the Wild West is unglamorous and persistent. Every observation, step, and decision carries weight, forming a continuous negotiation with the environment, animals, and fellow humans. Late night drapes the town in a calm, almost hypnotic darkness. Lanterns cast soft circles of light along the boardwalks, flickering gently in the cool breeze that drifts over the prairie. Dust lies quietly now, settling in corners and on wooden surfaces, giving everything a faint, muted glow. Even as life slows, vigilance never truly ends. Horses shift in their stalls, a distant dog barks, and occasional footsteps echo along the empty streets. The Wild West offers no complete respite, only quieter moments to catch your breath. You walk slowly through the town, noting subtle details in the dim light. Women finish their chores with careful movements, placing water buckets without spilling a drop. Children have retreated indoors, and a few stray cats creep silently along fences, eyes glinting in the lantern glow. Every movement is deliberate, shaped by the necessity of caution. Life here is an unbroken series of observations and adjustments. One misstep, even minor, can ripple into larger consequences. An odd, almost humorous detail catches your attention. A horse in a nearby corral shakes its mane vigorously, flicking dust onto the fence and ground. It pauses briefly to look around, as if aware of your presence but entirely indifferent. Even animals operate on survival instincts, adapting quietly to the hazards around them. Humans share this need for constant awareness, but with more conscious calculation. Every small interaction, whether with animals, objects, or people, shapes your chances of making it through the night unscathed. Hunger nudges at you again, subtle but insistent. You unwrap a piece of bread and some dried meat, chewing slowly and deliberately. Taste is secondary, sustenance is primary. Each bite fuels alertness and readiness. Food is not indulgence, it's strategy, an essential tool to maintain energy and focus. In the quiet of night, these small acts of self-care reinforce your survival. The saloon emits faint sounds, soft conversation, the shuffle of chairs, and distant piano notes. These muted noises provide both comfort and context. Observing social interactions is as crucial as tending to physical needs. Who can be trusted? Who has resources? Who knows something critical for survival? Social awareness functions as an invisible safety net, guiding behavior and decisions. Beyond the town, the prairie stretches into darkness. Shadows merge and familiar landmarks fade into a tapestry of subtle shapes. Even in quiet moments, the potential for danger persists. Sudden weather shifts, unseen predators, or minor accidents could escalate quickly. Isolation magnifies risk, requiring heightened attention and thoughtful adaptation. A miner trudges past, with a lantern, his clothes dusty, boots worn. His movements are repetitive, careful, and deliberate. Frontier survival depends on this quiet, persistent effort. Fetching water, tending animals, repairing fences, performing routine chores. Mistakes are rarely dramatic but can accumulate, threatening health and resources. Heroism is rare. Endurance is constant. The town well, though quiet, remains a symbol of necessity and risk. Contamination, spills, or injury while drawing water could have cascading consequences. Vigilance, patience, and observation remain paramount. Every small action contributes to a delicate equilibrium that sustains life here. Scholars still debate whether frontier resilience stemmed primarily from social cooperation or sheer individual endurance. Observing this town, it's clear both are vital. Every decision, rationing food, repairing tools, monitoring animals, and watching social cues, has weight. Neglect invites risk. Attentiveness fosters survival. As midnight settles fully, the town hums softly, lanterns glowing like distant stars against the prairie dark sky. You feel the quiet fatigue of prolonged vigilance, the subtle burn of repeated exertion, and the persistent tension of adaptation. The Wild West is unglamorous, relentless, and understated. Every observation, every step, every small decision matters in this continuous negotiation with environment, animals, and fellow humans. Survival is not heroic, it is quiet, measured, and persistent. The night deepens further, and a gentle stillness settles over the town. Lanterns glow faintly, casting soft, warm light on the wooden boardwalks and dust-covered buildings. The prairie beyond stretches quietly into darkness, only the occasional rustle of grass or distant animal movement reminding you that life continues outside the town's fragile perimeter. Your steps slow, your breathing steadies, and the tension of constant vigilance begins to ease just a little. You find a quiet spot on a shaded bench, the faint hum of the saloon piano drifting on the breeze. The town is almost asleep, but life remains subtly alive around you. A horse shifts in its stall, a dog curls in the corner, and the wind carries the faint scent of wood smoke and dry grass. Everything is soft, muted, and rhythmic. You feel the weight of the day's exertions, the constant awareness, and the subtle ache of endurance beginning to melt away. The lessons of the day lingered gently in your mind. Observation, patience, adaptability. These are the quiet forces that carried people through the relentless challenges of the Wild West. Even in the absence of danger, you recognize the value of careful attention, small, deliberate actions, and steady persistence. Each breath feels slower, each heartbeat quieter, as your body and mind settle into the calm of night. Outside, the stars begin to appear, faint and twinkling against the dark prairie sky. The air is cool, soft against your skin. You imagine the whisper of the wind carrying the faint sounds of life across the town, a subtle lullaby of endurance and quiet resilience. Slowly, your eyelids feel heavier, your thoughts drifting like dust in the lantern light. Tonight, the Wild West is distant, softened by memory and imagination. You are safe here, and yet the lessons remain. Vigilance, patience, and adaptation are the steady companions of survival. Let your body sink into the quiet, your mind float with the rhythm of the night. Good night.